Okay. I'm going to leave it one more minute because I want people to join the session. Let the numbers climb up. Okay. Well, welcome everyone this afternoon or this morning or this evening, wherever you are calling in from or joining us from. I'm Charlene Overend and I'm Head of Partnerships here at Purple Tuesday. And with me on my right is Mike Adams, who is the founder and chief executive of Purple and the creator of Purple Tuesday. And this is, we called it a time for a cuppa with Mike and Charlene, an opportunity for you to ask questions about Purple Tuesday, about your disability inclusion journey, anything that you want, obviously within reason, about how we can support you. Well, I've come on brand today. I'm wearing purple. I've got my purple cup with my cuppa in it, and I'm ready to rock and roll. To get the conversation going, Mike, yeah. I think it might be really useful for those who haven't heard the story about Purple Tuesday, sort of where it's come from and where it is today, and why you set it up.
No, absolutely, and I'm delighted to be joining you. You look very good in purple, I have to say. I've gone blue today, believe it or not. So, no, just to say, in terms of Purple Tuesday, 5-6 years ago, went Christmas shopping. And anyone who knows me, shopping is not my favourite thing in life, and I try to get all the shopping done in one day. And when I do go shopping, I need to utilise my wheelchair. And with my non-disabled partner, we went into a shopping centre one Sunday, and we went into 28 shops on that day. And in 23 of the 28 shops, either we were ignored completely by frontline staff, or the frontline staff only spoke to my partner. And, you know, we realised that it wasn't direct discrimination, but what we were seeing was a fear by the frontline staff, a lack of confidence by the frontline staff that they may cause unintentional offence by saying the wrong thing and doing the wrong thing. So the default position then absolutely became, you swerve the conversation altogether. And the solution to that was Purple Tuesday. And it was just, you know, sometimes in life, Charlene, you just need a bit of luck, a bit of fortune. That was Sunday. And would you believe it? I guess not. On the Monday, I attended a government retail roundtable meeting. And the minister at the time said that, look, we really need to think about some initiatives to get retail going. Anyone got any ideas? And there was this kind of silence. And I just piped up and I told them the story of the previous day, and it just kind of rolled out of my mouth. And I said, look, we've got Black Friday, we have Cyber Monday. Why don't we have Purple Tuesday, where we support businesses to improve the customer experience and make commitments to their existing disabled customers and their family and potential ones. And as they say, the rest is history.
Absolutely. And yeah, definitely it was an opportunity that was sitting there waiting to be seized. I think what you found at that table was that there was a real desire in the room to be able to be more supportive and engaging and welcoming to the disabled consumer, but there was this apprehension about, you know, how to do it and so on. So I think definitely it was written in the stars that you were at that round table on that day. So just to say to the room, if you've got any questions at all, please just put them into the chat function or the Q&A section, and myself and Mike will be able to answer your questions. Otherwise, Mike will just keep talking. As we all know, he loves to talk, and I'm not too far behind you. So just to get going then, Mike, on this. So obviously you've been working in this space now for quite a while, and what do you think is the most common mistake that organizations are making, or what is the most common thing that they're just getting wrong?
Well, I think there are two things. I think there is this concept, this perception as perfection as necessary. And if we can't do everything right for everybody, then we shouldn't engage at all, because we leave ourselves open to exposure and stuff. And so for a lot of organizations, it becomes an issue of risk for which they're not prepared to take, so nothing happens. And clearly, and we did a webinar not long ago with disabled people, and what did they say? Just start, just do something. And it is the context in which you do something that disabled people will understand. You're not going to be brilliant at everything, but actually, hello, can I help you? Is there anything we can do? I'm sorry, we're not able to do that. Goes a huge, long way for any customer. And I also think that it's really interesting that sometimes the raison d'etre, particularly if you're business to consumer, is the relationship with your customer and customer service. And then we apply disabled customers and the whole thing gets lost and goes out of the window. And really, for me, it is about applying your customer service training plus. And just one final thing is that forever and ever, when we walk into the room and we talk about Purple Tuesday and we talk about disability, the international sign for disabled people is the wheelchair, recognised all the way around the world. And people immediately think what you're talking about is wheelchair users. And as we know, they wheelchair users comprise 8% of the disabled population. Up to 80% have hidden disabilities. Increasingly, we're talking about mental health. Today, we've been talking a lot about people on the neurodiverse spectrum. We did a webinar about a year ago about cancer and living with cancer. And even those with cancer didn't realise they had rights under disability regulation. So, we are talking about 22% of the UK population with a combined spending power of 274 billion and rising at 14% per annum. And I just defy anyone listening today when someone walks in the boardroom and says, look, I've got a really, really good idea. We should be improving our customer service to this disability market. And actually, we know they've got the greatest brand loyalty. We don't have to do much. Most of it's common sense. Most of it's customer experience. I defy any organisation to turn around and go, no, that's not for us. Yeah. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to that point, obviously it's 22% here in the UK, 17% globally in terms of the disability market, and $8 trillion in terms of value. And we found out today, amazingly, that only 43% of that 8 trillion is being spent because of inaccessibility and poor customer experience and just not being able to access the goods and services and the disabled people want.
Absolutely. And then you layer on top of that, which we've been talking about a lot today, which is the online, and the fact that we could end up in 2022, broadly speaking, resolving lifts and ramps issues. So broadly speaking, addressing physical accessibility, and then just creating a whole host of barriers in the online world that do not need to be there, that most can be removed overnight. And we know, again, from the UK, the click away pound 17.1 billion is lost in sales as disabled people jump off a website before purchasing due to poor accessibility and poor customer service. So this is a huge opportunity for businesses. And we say that because if those businesses take up the mantle and put in place the changes that we think are needed, that then drives a hugely better quality customer experience for disabled people.
Absolutely. So we've got a few questions coming in, Mike, and some of them are quite long, so I'm trying to my speed reading is being challenged here. But there is one here around converting their documents onto the website and some of them are user guides to make them accessible, and what is the most accessible format. I'm not an accessibility expert, so I'm not going to pretend to be one. However, I do know that all documents can be made accessible. So whether it's a PDF, you must make sure that you're tagging the information in the PDF. HTML, from a digital point of view, it's really an accessible format. It's about skilling up. So when we talk about the creation of content, and actually, if you are around, there's a last session of today, which is all about accessible content and accessible communications, which absolutely fits into this. And our access expert, Andrea, will be part of that session, and we'll be given some really good top tips. So this is a question to ask Andrea, absolutely. But it is about educating yourself in how to make your documents accessible. And if you're unable to undertake that task yourself, there is lots of services out there that will take your documents and put them into accessible formats for you. If the job is quite big and you've got a lot of documents to turn around, this may be the easiest solution for you. But all in all, what I know is that you can create documents from a standing start to make them into accessible formats, and documents can be remediated to make them accessible as well. So you're able to do it. So definitely, it's not a challenge. It's just about providing the time and the resource to making it happen.
And as Charlene said, at 7 o'clock tonight, we have one of the experts on this issue, Andrea Kennedy, who's going to give a kind of brief seminar on the things to do. So absolutely tune in. But I just I've seen a question from Tom around quantitative data around disability disclosure in large organizations. And I don't know the data sets, but what I absolutely do know, Tom, is that if we argue that 22% of the UK population have rights under disability legislation, then you would realistically expect the numbers in employment in organisations that are reflective to at least be between 12 to 15% in my book. And what we know is generally those numbers are between 4 and 7%. And what we do know is if you agree with the up to 80% have hidden disabilities, if I walk into a room, instantly people know I'm disabled, but 4 out of 5 people can choose if they so wish to disclose or not to disclose. And you've got to think about the environment in which people would want to. And I'm just going to tell a very brief story with one organisation that we work with, a big organisation, particularly in lockdown, where the chief executive did a lot of work around disability and particularly around mental health, because it was a big issue in the organisation. And I joined that chief executive on a thank goodness it's Friday virtual with their 400 staff across the UK. And he just set out 10 minutes about why and what they were doing and what they had done and what they were going to do. And then you have that dreaded moment where you go, right, anyone got any, the dreaded moment we had 10 minutes ago, when there's no questions coming, by the way. That dreaded moment. And then he went one stage further and he said, well, don't just put it in the chat box, come off you and ask me the question. And there was this silence. And as you sit there, you think, my goodness, this has been silent for about 3 minutes. It was probably about 15 seconds. And this guy came off mute and said, look, I never thought, I've been here 15 years. I'm a senior kind of manager in this organization. I never thought I'd feel the day where I am going to tell the whole workforce that I've got a mental health condition. I've had it for 15 years and I haven't told anyone. But the way you've spoken today, I want to tell everyone. And there was kind of this gasp as you can on virtually. And then 10 seconds later, someone else came up and said, well, if such and such is saying, I want to tell you that I've got dyslexia. My coping strategy is to go home every night and do an extra hour and a half just to keep on top of things. But I want to tell you that today. Within 10 minutes, that chief executive had 7 more members of staff who had declared their disability. And why? Because they had started to create a voice in the organisation from the top down, and they were saying exactly what they were doing, how they were doing it. They weren't going to change the world overnight, but they had made a commitment and people felt able to. And the telling thing for me, Charlene, is 2 months later, someone I know became their director of marketing. And I said, non-disabled, by the way, and I said, why have you gone there? And she said, Mike, I love what they say about disability and diversity. It's a type of organisation I want to work for, so I have. Mm-hmm. And so there are huge benefits to everybody in terms of just talking about the issues, vocalising the issues. And I think if there's one legacy that comes out of COVID, is some of the myths around mental health will be blown away forever, and rightly so. And I think I saw a report for the first lockdown that was about mental health, the last taboo in the city. Well, I think next time we see that, hopefully that report will have dramatically changed, with people who never thought they would be impacted on mental health either have or someone in their close family has. Mm-hmm. So goes back to your point, goes back to the point that just get started, just do something and build that momentum, and it benefits both customers and employees.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for me, right, I feel sometimes that I get a bit whenever the word disclosure and declare is being used in terms of, you know, understanding the disability data. It sort of sounds such a negative approach, the language that we're using, and, you know, we're asking people to share. From my point of view, so would you like to share your information around your disability rather than disclose or declare it? It's like so I think we as society need to think of the language that we're using that is more inclusive, so that people feel that they can share their disability information.
I absolutely agree with you. And in many ways, if you think about society now, see it as disclosure very much as a tick box exercise, where actually the world and the language we currently talk about is social impact.
Absolutely.
And what is it that enables us to unlock social impact, and people being honest and open and sharing their experiences and their work preferences it is one way of doing that.
Absolutely. So we've got Rachel here, who is a bit frustrated in terms of, I suppose, the lack of progress from organisations to be more welcoming and supportive to those with autism, dementia, other sensory sort of conditions. And you know, I think what you've mentioned here, Rachel, is about, you know, stores still, you know, playing their music really loud and really being would you say unforgiving to bring it to drop the noise down, and sort of in this mindset that it has to be at that level. Yes, I think I personally I agree with you. I think there's a lot of organizations that are really embracing and understanding and are willing to make the changes to be more supportive of those with sensory conditions. There's a lot more to happen. You know, we have organizations like the Hidden Disability Sunflower Lanyard that has made such progress, particularly in the particularly in the travel industry, I think is where they probably have the biggest impact. And so we're seeing lots of changes being made there. Obviously, the quiet hour, autism quiet hour has been implemented, and we do see that rolling out across organizations. Again, I get this little bit, why does it have to be just for this 1 hour on this one particular day? And organizations are starting to realize that, it has to be spread out across the week a lot more, maybe have longer periods of time. So it shouldn't just be autism or a quiet hour. It could be like a longer period of time, so that we're not forcing individuals that don't want this amount of sensory overload into this one small period of time to be able to access your goods and services. So I completely understand, Rachel, the frustration that you're experiencing. And there is a lot of ground to cover yet to come. But at least the conversations are being had, I think, is probably where we're at.
No, absolutely. And Rachel, no one is putting on rosy tinted glasses and saying everything is now brilliant. But I do think we are starting to see a shift. And I do think it is important that we support organisations to understand the commercial benefits and the social benefits. And it's been really interesting if you take sensory rooms, for example, and the whole thing about quiet hours. I can tell you there, because in year one of Purple Tuesday, it was a pilot with the retail sector. And I can tell you that so many shopping centres introduced quiet hours, and the vast majority of them looked at their week and went, "Oh, it's quite quiet on a Tuesday morning or a Thursday. We'll have quiet hour on a Tuesday morning between 9 and 10." And then, of course, they introduce it, and then no one comes. And then they come back and go, "Yeah, well, we tried it, but it didn't work." And then you go, do you understand? Have you got any awareness of some of the chaotic lives that go on with people on the neurodiverse spectrum overnight and the lack of sleeping? If you had a massively disrupted night, and by the way, I've got a 10-month-old baby, so I know what it's like to have a massively disrupted night, even now. But I can absolutely tell you, the last thing I would want in the world is to be in a shopping centre at 9 o'clock the following morning. Just wouldn't do it. And then shopping centres started moving it to 2, 3 in the afternoon. And you know what? The people came. The people came, and it grew and it grew. And the vast majority of people, by the way, said, "I can't stand the music, so I've started coming to the quiet hours because." And so again, it was something that started for a particular specific disability that has evolved into a service that works for all customers. And so, Rachel, we absolutely need to keep going. This is why we're doing today. This is why Purple Tuesday is on the 1st of November, because we've got to get to a tipping point where making accessibility changes becomes the norm, not the exception.
Absolutely. And again, a little bit more frustration in terms of the sort of the parking industry. I see there Rihanna's mum has shared some challenges that she's facing, and I think again, parking, we spoke about it earlier today, how parking bays are not being used by those with the blue badges that are needed here in the UK, but used by others, but then actually are needed by maybe some or people who have hidden impairments that may not necessarily have a blue badge, but they need the parking just as much. I think there's, in terms of the parking industry worldwide, I think there's a lot that needs to be done in this space. There's the design element, which is what we're picking out from your statement, Rihanna, in terms of not having really accessible design around the parking and considering the different types of disabilities, wheelchair users, those with other assistive aids and so on. So I think there is a lot more work that needs to be done with the parking industry, and thankfully we do have associations here, pardon me, in the UK that are willing to listen. But I think again, it's one of those things, we've started the journey, but there is a lot left to be done.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. And if you think about the numbers that we've talked about earlier, And you think about shopping centres or town centres, you know, having 2, 3 accessible buses is never going to be enough. And, you know, they need to be policed correctly, but they also need to be in the quantity that would enable disabled people to want to come into town. And I can tell you from my experience, if I can't park, I won't come. And the other thing I'd say to you, and this is why we're delighted to be working with changing places, you know, if you can't go to the toilet, then you won't come as well. Or if you can only go to the toilet and totally lose every piece of dignity you have to just lie on the floor, you won't come. And I ask everyone to think about why changing places is so important, because think about going for a day out in a shopping centre and never knowing you can't go to the loo. And then we had a webinar a few months ago with young disabled people. And I remember the quote, and it said, you know, one day we will be running this town and I don't want to do daily battles with mobs. And what that person meant was, we are the next generation. We are going to need to stand up and take responsibility and leadership. But if I can't go to the toilet because the accessible facilities are used as store cupboard for mops and buckets, then we're simply not going to be able to come. And I think we have to really think about that. And I think kind of the question has really kind of, Rachel's question has really kind of drawn to us that there's always more to do, and we have to think about the little things as well. And just while you're going through, Charlene, because conscious of time, I want to ask you a question, because we've got a number of organisations who have been with Purple Tuesday for a long time, and we've got some organisations who have just joined, and it was brilliant to work with GiftGap just on the last kind of session. And from your experience of working with hundreds of organisations, what advice would you be giving to those who've just got started?
Yeah, I think, and it's been brought up a number of times, and it's already been brought up in this session today, in that you just need to get started, be a bit brave, and make a commitment and deliver that commitment. For me, Rome is not built in a day. And it's about recognizing that being on the Purple Tuesday, being on your disability inclusion journey, is about that. It is a journey, and it's about identifying the commitments and the things that you can do, and implement them, celebrate them, and share them, and then move on to the next thing and continue to build and to build. Because some of the things that you can do really do not cost anything. It can be just about the desire and the commitment to improve, and it's all within our will to be able to make some of those changes in your organizations. What I would say is, and what I have seen organizations struggle with, is if there isn't leadership buy-in, if you do not have support from the top, it is very, very difficult to move these things forward. And especially if it requires things like a policy change, an adjustment to the office space, or an adjustment to the office, to the premises, changes to the information on a website, things that are really, really quite simple, that possibly do not cost a lot. But if you don't have the buy-in from the leadership, it is very difficult to get those goals. So I do see in organizations that frustration from those who are at the coalface. They're seeing it, they see the need for it, and getting that up the chain can be difficult. But again, it's about, Mike, as you've said earlier on, if you put it to the leadership, if you put it to the decision makers, the opportunities for the business, both commercially and socially, and what that means, then it's a very, very difficult decision to turn down, and a very difficult opportunity to simply dismiss. So that is sort of one of the things. Yes, just get started, and even if it is a small step, make the step, celebrate it, share it, and bring others on the journey with you. For those who have been, part of Purple Tuesday for quite a while, for me, it is don't stop, right? Don't stop.
Speed up.
Don't stop the change. Because the collective impact, and we see this from the case studies and the stories that are coming in, is just huge. And those, whether your individual changes that you're making as a business is impacting obviously your own customer base, but whenever collectively we put this all together, the impact of Purple Tuesday is really significant. So much so that we've actually taken Purple Tuesday this year as a global initiative. It's not just an issue that resonated with the UK business population. It's not just an issue that resonates with the people with disabilities in the UK, with our communities, with our government. This is something that actually it resonates worldwide. And, so I'm particularly proud that we have been able to take Purple Tuesday to a global audience. It has been a bit of a challenge, though, I have to say. There's nothing but challenges with anything that you will, do, as long as you have the resilience just to keep going. Mike, do you want to maybe share a few challenges around the global journey that we have been on thus far?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And language is one, which is easy to get overable. So whether it's disabled people, people with disabilities, people of determination, ultimately we are customers who happen to have a disability. But I think the main challenge is when we started Purple Tuesday, we literally had to be in front of every kind of organisation and sell the story, sell why it was needed, etc., and get them into the right place. And when you work globally, and the way the world is now, you simply can't do that. It's very difficult to do that. And I know because I was in Dubai a couple of weeks ago for the round table, and the difference it made just talking to people face to face was huge. And the risk of virtual meetings like this is people can nod along, they can say yes, and then they say, look, we'll come back to you. And then they come back to you and go, well, we've decided this is a corporate social responsibility issue. We've got our one project for this year, so maybe come back next year. And you go, oh my goodness. But there's no comeback, because in the room you can put it. So it feels like in some areas of the world, we're back to where we were 5 years ago with Purple Tuesday. But also, I am really excited. There was a dinner launch in Karachi, Pakistan on Sunday night. And given the catastrophic flooding in Pakistan recently, the ability to use Purple Tuesday just to raise the profile of people with disabilities in Pakistan with the business community is so important. As I said, I was in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates 2 weeks ago, and some of what we are going to be doing there, people of determination, there really, really is momentum. And I know, Charlene, for Purple Tuesday this year, you're not going to be by my side in Piccadilly. You are going to be in Minnesota on a day road trip in Minneapolis as we take Purple Tuesday to the States. And this is about that 15 to 17% of the global population who want to have a good quality customer experience. And the way to do that is to support and provide solutions and share solutions with businesses to make that happen. Because one, it's good for businesses. Two, it's then good for the customer. So it's really quite simple in its construction, but hugely, hugely powerful. And the other thing to say about in all the things we've talked about and all the adaptations and reasonable adjustments, what works in a customer context also works in an employee context as well. So we're building solutions that work across, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So just want to catch up on a few other of the questions that come in, that has come in. So we've got an anonymous one, that says, do we think that disabled people should be asked to create their reasonable adjustment policy for the business if they haven't got one? Or who should be responsible? Well, the short answer is, I feel, it is the business that is ultimately responsible. It may be that it needs to be spotlighted if there is an issue with the policy, if it currently isn't in place, or if it isn't disability inclusive, then it may need to be just flagged to the business that is the case, because it could be a genuine oversight by the business. And so therefore it's an education piece and working together. From our perspective, we absolutely don't want to create a divide between the business community and the disability community. We have to learn from each other, and disabled people have to be involved in the decision-making processes, the design, the development, the implementation, the marketing. And we spoke about this earlier today. We need the disability community, we need the disabled people involved in the whole top to bottom up approach with an organization. And if you're finding that your policy in the business isn't accessible, isn't inclusive enough, I think then you have a reasonable grounds to be able to raise awareness to the appropriate department of that, and even then signpost them to an organization. If you didn't want to get involved yourself, signpost to an organization that would be able to help, like people like us, and say, maybe you need additional expertise outside to be able to support.
I agree with you, and think about the best businesses in the world, and the best businesses in the world are in touch and in tune with their staff and their customers. They survey people, they get feedback on a regular basis, and we just need to do the same for disability. And I think for me, we go back to the numbers. You said $8 trillion worldwide. We talk about 274 billion in the UK. And less than 10% of businesses have a strategy into this disability market. This needs to be seen as an investment, not a cost. And I think it is people to go, look, we want to create the best experience, actually drawing on the lived experience of the people we want to support is a key component part of that. But we just need to be careful and mindful that we're not saying, well, if you want to come to us, then you tell us what you need and we might think about doing it or not. Because then there's no ownership either. No. And I think this is why, for us, Purple Tuesday is about supporting businesses to have a better relationship with their existing and potential customers, supported by our brilliant disabled customer ambassadors who have that lived experience to support, amplify and share. But I think we just need to see this is a commercial and social opportunity, and it's not something we simply do in the good times. This just has to be normal practice. So people like Rachel in 2 or 3 years' time don't have to ask these really difficult questions about car parking, because it's just happening. No, absolutely. And we always say the correlation between, if you want to attract more disabled customers into your business to spend their money with you, accessing that disability market, then you need to reflect that in your employee base. And if your policies and processes therefore are simply not accessible and inclusive for those employees, then you're going to lose them and they're going to move on. And disabled people are getting more of a choice in terms of where they work. So we're seeing more opportunities opening up that way. So organizations really need to look at their policies and processes for the employee, just as much as how they are starting to attract those into the business. I'll take the full loop back to why Purple Tuesday was created. What did we say? 28 shops, 23 of them ignored. Those 5 who did not ignore me had an absolute bonanza that day.
You opened your wallet.
Because I opened my wallet and I spent what I might have spent in 28 shops just in 5.
Absolutely.
And why? Because they made me feel welcome and they gave me a good, I wouldn't even say brilliant, but a good customer experience for which they're built on. And I think that's incredibly important. And customers aren't silly. And if you just think about it yourself, if you go somewhere and you're not made to feel welcome, you really are going to think twice about going back again. And, you know, we know that 85% of people, given the definition of disability we talked about, will either have someone in their close family or someone in their network who has a disability. And the question is, would you want your auntie, your uncle, your niece, your nephew, your mum, your dad, your grandma, who happens to have a disability, to come into your organisation and be treated differently simply because they have a disability? And the answer is no, which is why this is a question for staff, it's a question for teams, and it's a question for organisations to change their practice.
Yeah, no, definitely. And another question, and we've talked about this again a lot here at Purple. So we know that the disability symbol is the wheelchair. We know that there's only 8% of wheelchair users in terms of the population. What, in terms of this signage, do you think needs to be now the universal sign for disability, given the, and I like to coin it, the diversity of disability? So how can we get that across? I know I have my preference.
If I knew the answer to that one, I'd be very rich.
You'd be very rich, yeah.
But what I would say to you is increasingly organisations are replacing the wheelchair symbol with the not all disabilities are visible to reflect 8% of people with hidden disabilities. We've seen the sunflower lanyard, as you talked about, hidden disabilities, take off as well. It's not that easy, and to my mind, I think it's absolutely the right thing to change the not all disabilities are visible and the sunflower. I don't want us to get obsessed with the next 5 years of coming up with an icon that reflects the diversity of disability. I would much prefer people put their minds, their thinking and their money into just talking to their disabled customers and reflecting that in, you know, changes that can be made, because you then get that snowball running. And in the same way as, you know, for me, the context in which people say, oh, you're a disabled person or you're a person with disability, it's the context in which it's said rather than the actual words. And, you know, I want to ensure that Purple Tuesday leaves an absolute legacy for the next generation of disabled customers to have a great customer experience.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, the key is education.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And if more people knew, even simply the stat, only 8% of the population, the disabled population, is a wheelchair user, then automatically just even having that statistic in your head can change the attitude to then you're looking at the parking and, you know, the services, the disabled toilets, etc., etc. So you can automatically see the shift happening with just education. So for me, the key takeaway would be help inform your people and raise awareness around disability to build confidence, to build capacity and understanding. And that is going to be fundamentally the cornerstone for them to be able to deliver a really good, accessible customer experience.
No, absolutely. And if you're watching today, you know, just do something and go to purpletuesday.co and just get started.
Absolutely.
You know, and join this terrific and really vibrant movement. And it's been absolutely brilliant today just to hear the different practices that's going on all across the world committed to the disabled customer, and together we can make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to pop off now for another cuppa, but if you want to join me and some wonderful guests. We're going to be looking at how to support customers with hidden disabilities, and that's going to be at 4 p.m. UK time. So you've got the link. Keep in touch, and I look forward to meeting you all then. Thank you.
Thank you.